So my name is Brianna Ripka, and I'm the Voter Services Coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. And thank you all for joining us tonight for our 2025 Voter Education Series Ballot Box Basics. For your awareness, this webinar is being recorded, and as an attendee at this webinar, your camera is turned off, so your face will not be included in the recording. A reminder that closed captioning is available, and to enable closed captioning on your screen, click Live Transcript in your Zoom taskbar. If you need more assistance with closed captioning, I'm dropping a help document in the chat, and if we could improve accessibility for you in any way, please let us know. Tonight, we begin our time together with a land acknowledgement. Colonial Pennsylvania's boundaries were first drawn in 1681 over the original nation's land. We in Pennsylvania acknowledge the land ownership of the original indigenous peoples, honoring the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the great nations of Pennsylvania: Erie, Iroquois, Munsee, Delaware, Shawnee, Ohio Valley, Susquehannock, and Lenape. We honor all original nations of the past and those among us today. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our state office oversees a grassroots network of 30 local leagues all across Pennsylvania. The league encourages informed and active involvement in government while working to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. To learn more about our work and to subscribe to our action alerts, please visit our website at palwv.org. I'll drop these links in the chat. Tonight, I'm pleased to welcome you to our webinar, PA's Closed Primaries, Exclude 1 Million Voters, and Impact Democracy. We design these webinars because we know that voting, government, and elections can be complicated. In 2025, these monthly webinars will discuss the important topics like registering to vote, misinformation, safety at the polls, and much more. Whether you're a first-time voter or have voted in every election you're eligible for, we think you'll learn something new. To watch previous recordings of Ballot Box Basic webinars and to sign up for future events, please visit the link in the chat. Throughout tonight's presentation, you're welcome and encouraged to ask questions using the Q&A function. We will leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end of the event, and you're welcome to engage with fellow participants in the chat, but please note we will only be answering questions from the Q&A pool. In addition to recording, please note that we will also send a copy of slides to all registrants. I will now pass it over to our Voter Services Director, Pauline, to share some important updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brianna. We're so thrilled to have Diana Dickey. The League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania has long advocated for ending this closed primary system. In Pennsylvania, we're just one of a handful of states that have closed primaries, where only voters who are registered Republican or Democrat may participate. So lots of people, if they register independent or anything else, they're excluded from this government-run primary. Diana has closely followed this issue and has advocated for the league's position and has represented the league at legislative hearings. She's on top of everything that's happening in Harrisburg. Tonight's presentation, she's going to also address the arguments for opening the primaries and the history of this effort to affect change. So thank you, Diana. Take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Colleen, and thank you for making these arrangements and telling us about the league, Brianna. Can everybody hear me well? Am I coming across clearly in terms of audio? Thanks. Thumbs up. Okay. Yeah, Colleen actually put this first slide together, and she wants me to remind everybody about the important dates coming up in 2025. This March, we have special elections open to everybody in the district. So that's not a primary. It's a special election. All voters should go vote. Pennsylvania State Senate District 36 in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania House of Representatives District 35 in Allegheny County. Then on May 5th, important deadline. If you are a Republican or a Democrat, by May 5th, you need to register for the primary, or you need to change your party. Then, of course, on May 20th is the primary election. This is a closed primary where Republicans and Democrats will go to the polls to vote. And then, of course, in November, we have the general municipal election. It's open to all voters, regardless of party. And in November, voters will be voting for a Republican or a Democrat who has succeeded in winning the May primary. I think Colleen gave a great introduction as to what we're going to cover this evening. So I just wanted to talk, why do we have primaries at all? It's to narrow the field of candidates prior to the general election or the presidential election. And this is where the political parties, Republican or Democratic, determine their candidates in advance of the election. And but they don't relate to primaries, don't relate to minor party candidates who can run in a general election. One more key date is that on March 12th, that's the start of the signature collection period for candidates who are running as an independent or a party other than Republican or Democrat. So what is the history? Well, primaries were adopted to give a direct voice to voters. Prior to that, party leaders would identify their party's candidate, and the infamous smoke-filled rooms, and the Pennsylvania Election Code, the rules about primaries, that goes back to 1937. Primary characteristics. Well, there's two major characteristics. You're either open or you're closed. In open primaries, voter registration with a party is not a condition for participation, but closed, highlighted in yellow, that's what we have in Pennsylvania. Registration with a Republican or Democratic Party is a condition for participation. And then the other characteristic is whether we're partisan or nonpartisan. And we're partisan. We have separate Republican and Democratic ballots. There are only a couple of nonpartisan primaries in the state where there's one primary ballot for all candidates, like Alaska's top 4, for example. There's several different systems. This slide, I'm not going to read it. What I want to show you is that, it's complicated. And there's a lot of different systems around the country. There are open nonpartisan primaries, such as Alaska's top 4, followed by ranked choice voting, and top 2 in a couple of states. And then open partisan, I don't know if you can see my cursor, where that's most of the states where voters can participate in the partisan primary of his or her choice. I have that, and in these states, they don't have registration as a Republican or a Democrat. The state isn't interested in that, and voters can just participate. They just go vote in a primary. I have the states listed from west to east, not alphabetically. Then there's all these degrees of open or closed. Semi-open is a term that's been used, and that's where Republican or Democratic ballots are open to independent registered voters. And that's the legislative goal of current bills right now in Pennsylvania. There's other variations on primaries, such as same-day party affiliation allowed in a couple of states. There's some states where the Republican and Democratic Party can decide the rules ahead of each primary. And so statutorily in those states, the parties could decide, but North Carolina has opened theirs, and some states have closed theirs, and in some other states, Democrats have only opened theirs. Then we have the fully closed by statute. voters must register with the Democrat or Republican Party. And you see, Pennsylvania is part of a small minority of states where we are fully closed by statute, and primaries are only open to Republicans or Democrats. So one takeaway from that then is if you are not included in some manner, you are excluded. So we are a closed primary state, which needs to change. As I showed, we're an outlier. Only a handful of states are fully closed. And this is excluding a lot of voters, around 1 in 8. Now, a lot of you are familiar with the voter registration form. When you register to vote in Pennsylvania, these are the choices on the voter registration form: Democratic, Republican, Green, Libertarian, or none, or other. And it does tell you on the form that to vote in a primary, you must register with either the Republican or the Democratic Party. So then these are the categories of voters that are collected by the Department of State. I need to here throw out some terms. So on the voter registration form, you see none, no affiliation in parentheses. And then we see unenrolled, unaffiliated, independent as other similar terms. The term unenrolled is what is being used in some proposed legislation. So that means unenrolled in the Republican or the Democratic parties. The term independent, though, is used even by a lot of legislators who are talking about opening primaries. It's a term that's understood by the general public. Here's some statistics that I looked up from February 25th. These are on the Department of State website. So we have around 8.8 million voters. And you see in here in Pennsylvania, Democrats, Republicans, the other, and then we see the nones, that category that you could check off on the voter registration form. And that's, pushing 1.1 million. And then, I did some number crunching. Others have done some number crunching. This category here called Green, Libertarian, or Other Party, this 344,000. If you break that apart, one could come up with probably another 100,000 voters, and that's why there's an estimated like 1.2 million voters who are nones or who under other may have written down independent, for example, and that's around 13% of voters across the state. And who are these independent voters? Well, they're around half of veterans. And this is estimated at 400,000 individuals in Pennsylvania. They're young voters, new voters who are increasingly unlikely to choose a party. And in Pennsylvania, when you look at voter registration statistics by county, there's a predominance of these independent voters in the Northeast, Southeast, Lehigh Valley, South Central, or Center County. Across the United States, independent voters are the largest block of voters. And here's this Gallup poll. Now, this is not voter registration, let me caution. This is, as you see, their question, because they're pollsters. In politics, as of today, do you consider yourself a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent? And so 43% of people are claim to be independent, which is more than the 28% for Republicans or Democrats, respectively. Now, I looked at some recent trends. So I looked up January. I have a typo on my slide, and I apologize. January of 24. So roughly a year ago, there were 965 no affiliation voters. My slide should say February of 25. The no affiliation is this number I showed you earlier of 1 million in that none category. So it's a growing group of registered voters. So why this matters? Well, we have it doesn't work for democracy because main reason is the low turnout in primaries. So a small number of voters are determining who then advances to the general election. Primaries, they're often uncontested, just one Republican, one Democrat. Um, Even if they are contested, mostly the party-based voters are turning out. And the election might be decided in the primary due to gerrymandering or demographics of parts of the state, making the November election just a formality. And then the primary voters who advance to the general election might lack a true voter mandate, even for their own party. And so somebody's elected to office. It's sad when voters go to the polls in November and they question, well, gee, who gave me these choices? And they're not really happy with either one of them. The primary turnout is much lower than in the general. Again, this slide is making the point that, and I looked up some statistics from the 2023 municipal primary. So that's every 2 years in the odd years. So in 2023, there were 1.8 million voters voted in the primary, and then 3 million in the fall. So only a minority of voters gave us the choices that we had in the municipal general election. And look at the presidential primary. Oh my goodness. What a difference between primary turnout and the fall election turnout. In even years, that's when we elect our members of our Pennsylvania House and Senate and our members of Congress. And look at the difference there too. So it's like, half as many voters are voting in the primaries in the general, and they're the ones who are defining the choices that we're seeing in the general election. So it really would improve democracy in Pennsylvania if we had more turnout in primaries. So, there's voter disinterest in the primary, and particularly if you're not a Republican or Democrat, why are you interested in the primary? Voter disinterest in the general, who gave me these choices? Then then somebody gets elected, of course, and we have elected legislators who are not answerable to the wider electorate because they just know it's a shoo-in the next time there's a primary. And then the election agenda is geared to avoiding a future primary challenger. And this year, local government matters, yet few voters participate. And although many municipal elections have no reason for partisan politics, you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to put together a township budget or figure out how to repair roads. So some other concerns that if there's a ballot question, as you know, in Pennsylvania for changing the state constitution, the final step after two passings in two separate legislative sessions, the final step is a ballot question put in front of the voters. Well, if that's run in the primary, it risks being decided by those very few primary voters, unless all voters know that a ballot question is open to all voters. But people who are not the habitual Republican or Democrat primary voters might not know that they are supposed to go to the polls in May and cast their vote on the ballot question. And then this exclusion of independent voters, this is my opinion. People are always talking about how, gee, the Pennsylvania presidential primary really doesn't count for too much, And I would put out an opinion that the exclusion of independent voters is one more reason why Pennsylvania has a limited influence in presidential primaries. So this is from the League of Women Voters, Where We Stand. This has been our long standing position that we oppose the current system of closed primaries, which exclude participation by electors. Electors, that's an old-fashioned word for voters. And that's the term that's in our old-fashioned election code. And so we oppose the exclusion of these electors who don't register with one of the major parties. And the League believes that changing the primary structure to one in which which includes all electors, would increase voter participation and could reduce political polarization. So we support changing to an open primary system in which all electors, regardless of registration, can participate in the primary of their of a major party of their choice, or a semi-open system in which electors who are not registered with a major party can participate in one of the major parties' primaries. And so here now, what would be then the benefit? Democracy needs participation, and we're now excluding 1.2 million voters, or 1/8, and we would now bring those into participation. And these proposals to open primaries to independent voters are popular across the political spectrum. There was a poll Franklin and Marshall did in August. 77% of people they polled were in favor of opening the primaries. Ballot PA, advocacy group for opening primaries, did a survey, same results. 5 former governors wrote a position that they favor opening the primaries. And every media market across the state has had some editorial or op-ed in favor of this. If you want to read all that press, it's on the website of ballotpa.org. Also, think about all taxpayers are paying for primary elections at an estimated cost of 20 to 50 million each primary. So that's, taxation without representation if you are independent. And truly that 1937 election code reflected a different time and need. And what we want is, with increased voter turnout, greater voter impact on the choice, the candidates to go to the general election, but most of all, the responsiveness of elected officials to a larger electorate. So, what is the change that we're suggesting, that these bills are suggesting for Pennsylvania? Well, semi-open primaries. So this would allow the unaffiliated, AKA independent voters, to vote in the primary. It's a simple change to the election code. It requires no constitutional amendment. It's realistic given other things in our code where we have partisan voter registration. But the how, we're reliant on the legislature to pass bills. We don't have a citizen initiative process in Pennsylvania. And this is just gives you a little overview across the United States of where there is citizen initiative, and the gray is none. And so we don't have that as an option. Some other states have amended their primary system through citizen initiative. So we're stuck, I guess you could say, using the legislative process, but other states have succeeded in using it. So it doesn't mean it's a dead end for us. New Mexico's right. Maine succeeded in using their legislature to open their primaries. New Mexico's making progress right now with their effort. And so the workable approach for Pennsylvania, given that we have partisan voter registration, is this semi-open primary. It acknowledges that there will still be people are still going to, when they register. Some people will register as a Republican or a Democrat. Other voters will not. And the semi-open primary will open the primary just to those voters who did not opt to be Republicans or Democrats. So the registered Republicans and Democrats would still receive their party-specific ballot. So if you are listening to this webinar, if you happen to be Republican or Democrat, as you know, when you go in the primary to vote, after you sign in, you're given either your Republican or your Democrat ballot. But so with the semi-open primary, the independent voters may request either the Republican or the Democrat ballot. And, some other states are already doing this. And I said, designated elections because Maine, for example, because of some other language in their code, they weren't able to give semi-open primaries for all elections, but so it could be some elections and not others. So the Pennsylvania effort to open primaries has been going on for a really long time. Now, I just learned that it's been going on since 1994. I started following this right around maybe all right, 10 years ago. And here we are in 25 to 26, and we have House Bill 280. Jared Solomon and his colleagues Kenyatta and Rab, and the Senate bill by Dan Laughlin and Lisa Boscola. Laughlin is a Republican, Boscola is a Democrat. Doesn't have a number yet. They're still collecting signatures prior to the formal introduction. So that's the good news, that there's legislation introduced again this session. We have this very short 2-year session. Sometimes things just don't get done in 2 years. Look at the last session, 23 to 24. There was success, limited success. There were 2 bills in the House State Government Committee, 976 by Marla Brown, 979 by Jared Solomon. And the House State Government Committee held hearings. I felt privileged to be able to deliver testimony from the League on supporting opening primaries, and the committee voted out both bills. And then it passed on a bipartisan floor vote. Sort of an unusual happening there. The Marla Brown bill was brought up for a vote. The language of the Solomon bill, which was almost identical, was introduced as an amendment to the Brown bill. And then the amendment passed, and then the bill passed on first consideration. So you could say, that the Solomon bill passed, or you could say the Brown bill passed, but that was really encouraging. Go back down to 29 to 20, Senate Bill 300, Joe Scarnati, a Republican, that had a hearing. It passed the Senate with only 8 nay votes, but there was no action in the House State Government Committee. But look at it this way: there was at one time it passed. What did I do there? Oh, at one time it passed the Senate, and then at another time it passed the House. So let's be optimistic. Let's keep working. So the simple changes to the 1937 election code are that the unenrolled voters, says electors, because may ask to cast a vote on the Republican or Democratic ballot, but they will not be bound by that choice in future elections. So by requesting the R or the D ballot, they're not saying, I want to register with that party. The R or D voters will still vote on their respective primary ballots. Republicans will not be able to vote on the Democrat ballot, and Democrats will not be able to request the Republican ballot. So there's no change to how that happens now in primaries for Republicans or Democrats. Third-party voters and candidates would continue to participate in the general election like they have. And there would be no change to party-specific elections of committee people, officers, or delegates, because now those elections often take place in May, but they are not technically primaries. Those are party-specific elections. So let me just dive into the legislation a little bit. So the words and unenrolled elector shall mean a person who's registered to vote, having selected none or no affiliation, or having selected other and written in a clear preference to be unaffiliated or independent. And that was why when I was showing you the statistics, I was showing you the numbers of nones, and then I was also showing you how a person could estimate that there might be another 100,000 other who are, as described in the bill, showing a preference for unaffiliated or independent. And they'll be permitted to vote in primary elections for candidates for public office. And the bill goes on to talk about the procedure. So upon confirming that they are a registered elector, the elections officer shall ask the unenrolled elector into which political party's primary the unenrolled elector decides to vote. And then a record will be kept of the ballot that the unenrolled elector selected. As we know, we have to be able to, there has to be a way to audit election results. So it has to be that there's a record of which ballot was selected by that elector. They only, but see, only the enrolled, in other words, Republican or Democrat, those are enrolled electors, will vote for party office. So that's clearly in the bills. So independents aren't going to be voting for your Republican chairperson, for example. The bills do also apply this semi-open primary to the primary for the president of the United States. This clause shows that by selecting one party's ballot or the other, you're not enrolling in that party, and you could choose a different ballot the next primary. And also there is something applying this to voters who vote on absentee or by mail. And this is let me just back up. So the county board shall process the application accordingly once the unenrolled elector requests to vote by mail on either the Republican or Democratic ballot. I think it's interesting that here in Colorado, where they've been doing vote by mail for a really long time, they send out both the Democrat and Republican ballots in the primary, and with instructions, vote just one. So they send them both out, but of course you're only allowed to return one, and that's how the independent voters can vote. So again, this was what happened in the last legislative session. I'm going to quickly go through the next part here. It's already 6:02. This is, to follow a bill, look up and so follow it this session. Down here, you can see the actions on a bill. You can see committee roll call, floor roll call. You can see amendments. You can click on the amendments. This shows, for example, what happened in committee. Now, what I put on the top here, see, in a box here on the top, what's down here, this brief description of an amendment, which is too small for you to see. So I put it like larger here on the top. And so these were changes that were made by amendment in the last legislative session, but these changes are now part of this year's bills. So we could say that there's progress. The bills continue to be cleaner and follow up on more details of the process. House committee roll call votes. Now, it's sad to say that it was partisan, in committee. The chair, minority Republican chair of the House State Government Committee, did encourage his colleagues of his party to vote nay. So that was unfortunate. Even though we had, Marla Brown, a Republican, introducing a bill. Then I'm going to skip over this part. Just wanted to show you that when the bill passed, we had 112 yays and 90 nays. So you can look that up yourself. And here's just goes to show you that, it was bipartisan. You can look up legislators and you can see, that it was bipartisan, and you can see who the supporters were in the last legislative session. That was the other bill. and again, very similar process. So, so to be a change agent, where our focus is the legislature, we don't have citizen initiatives. You want to encourage your state senator to be a co-sponsor of the Senate bill, or have your representative be a co-sponsor of the House bill. And I have to interject here that the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, we have not formally put out any statement that we support any particular bill. We may, as things move along, but upon we support in principle, of course, and these bills align with our policies, or or I should say our principles and where we stand, but we don't have a formal statement out there yet that with pertaining to a bill by number. But contacting legislators, contacting chair people is important. The Senate State Government Committee chair is Chris Dush, and he has not been supportive, but he could use some encouragement. And I'm going to get to what are the points that might matter to legislators. But here, last bullet, very important here. Please plan to participate in the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania's annual lobby day at the Capitol this spring, May 5th. I have to put in a plug for that. So why would an incumbent legislator support opening primaries? Well, how about a reason to talk to voters other than the base? How about a reason to talk about broader issues? Engagement with more voters in the primary can translate into more voters in the general. There's nothing to lose from having more voters. So if some candidates going around knocking on doors, knocking on voters, of course, in his or her party, pleased to get out the vote. But if that candidate, incumbent or new candidate, is knocking on doors and reaches out to independent voters, then at the time of the party primary, then those voters will already be familiar with that candidate come the November election. So those are arguments that you could make to an election, to your legislator. Why would a legislator be opposed? Well, we've pondered this. A lot of it is there's lack of information, the sheer numbers of unaffiliated voters. So I put up on a previous slide, the numbers. Those numbers are out there on the Department of State website, and you can go see for a given legislative district, or maybe you want to look at it by county, that in some parts of the state, 15% of voters are unaffiliated. Does the legislator know that that those are his or her constituents, and that many are unaffiliated? There has been misinformation about crossover or strategic voting. We hope that's been dispelled by now, that bills have been introduced session after session. There will not be any crossover voting. R's don't vote on the D, and D's don't vote on the R ballot. Even now there's cross, not to be confused with cross filing. So for some elections, namely school board, Republicans and Democrats can cross file, and then they appear on the Republican or the Democrat ballot. But still, in a primary, only Republicans or Democrats are voting, not independents, and which kind of crazy. Then there's false reasons that counties can't handle this. Well, if all of these other states around the country can handle this, why can't Pennsylvania? I think there's fear of changing the system that got elected. We know we have narrow majorities in our Pennsylvania legislature, and there's fear that, is something going to change by one or two is the majority going to change into a minority by 1 or 2 votes? So there's that fear. And these are really sad reasons, but they're out there. A desire to maintain the partisan spirit of elections, or party leadership fearing contested primaries. They wanting to control everything, and those are unfortunate reasons for maintaining the status quo. I think I've already covered all these points. We're excluding too many voters. Let's join 43 other states that have some way to allow independent voters. It's popular. Surveys have proven all taxpayers are paying for it. What about all the half of veterans that identify as independents? I mean, they've served their country, and how can we deny them full voting rights? And then this argument for the parties themselves. This can help build the parties. Republicans or Democrat parties have seen declines over the past couple of decades. So why not engage with independent voters? More conversations on more issues, and sometimes when a politician is out of office, that's when they support reform. And 5 former Pennsylvania governors representing both major parties have expressed full support for legislation that would repeal our closed primaries. You might want to take a look at the memos for the Dan Laughlin and Boscola bill. Look at their argument. Again, it's about fairness, and we're just excluding too many voters. The Solomon bill, again, fairness, and yes, we can do this. So be a change agent. Join the League of Women Voters to study, define, and take action on priority issues. You can sign up with Ballot PA at ballotpa.org. That's a statewide coalition under the leadership of the Committee of 70, working on opening the primaries. You can, if you want to know what's going on nationwide, openprimaries.org is following all of those. More engagement is with Pennsylvania independents. And I already covered that. Wanted to show that legislative efforts have succeeded and maybe will succeed. Rhode Island opened their primaries to independents in 2019. Maine in 2021. New Mexico is working on it now and having some success. Maine, how did they get it done in their legislature? These factors, it had been introduced in a previous session, like us. There's legislative turnover, large freshman class. Well, in the last legislative session, we here in Pennsylvania, we had a large freshman class. There was endorsement by leading press. We've got that. Support by the Maine League of Women Voters. But the messaging is that, this is not anti-party, it's pro-democracy. And it just makes sense to move in this direction. And so that's the messaging. Sadly, though, there are legislative efforts to close primaries in certain states. And if you want to follow that and what citizen movements citizens are doing to make sure that they can keep the primaries open, go to openprimaries.org, sign up for their emails if you want to follow all of those trends and actions. People have said, well, why not ranked choice voting? Well, that would be amazing. But again, it's not the baby step for opening primaries in Pennsylvania. But the ranked choice voting is being used in a big way in American cities. And several fairvote.org is following that. Okay, so questions or discussion? I can stop sharing it unless we think we need to go back to any one of my slides.
Thank you so much, Diana. I always feel like I learned something new about box basics. Yes, so it looks like we have a question from Judy. She asks, does this proposed semi-open primary law exclude a voter slash elector who had enrolled as a Green, Libertarian, etc.?
Right, yeah, those the bills as written do not encompass the Green and Libertarian. Those parties will continue using the process that they've always used, which is did I say March 12th was the date that they start gathering or circulating nominating papers, and they'll get their candidate on the November ballot in that manner.
Great, thank you. And then the next question from Kathy is, what is ranked choice voting?
Oh, okay. Ranked choice voting. Well, the ballot box basic series could do a whole, that's a topic that maybe you want to consider for a future webinar. That's a process whereby it has been called instant runoff voting, and I don't know if I can explain it without a diagram, but voters have a ballot and they rank let's say there's 4 candidates on there. They will rank them in order of preference, and then the candidate who gets the least number of votes is then taken off from the tally, and then that voters' preferences move up, and it goes through a runoff or an instant runoff until a candidate gets 50% or more of the vote. So this is a process that can elevate. Let's say a voter got 30% of the vote, but not 50%. Some other candidate who may have been in second place on the first round could actually end up winning the election after the rankings are all considered, and voters' secondary choices are considered. Interesting process. So being used in Alaska.
Great, thank you so much. And then Jodine has a question. She says, so would we have to have 4 ballots, regulate R and D, plus ballots for independents that do not include party offices? Or how would you prevent independents from voting for party offices?
Yeah, so right. So if there are party offices being elected at the time, they would not be on the ballots that are being presented to independent voters. The R or D ballots that that independents can request will not have those choices, but the Republicans and Democrats would be shown those choices. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Diane. And Colleen, do you want to ask me a question?
Sorry, I have a question, and I see that Janice has a question which is related. So Janice's question is, does this have to be voted in by the electorate?
No, it doesn't. It does not require a change to the Pennsylvania Constitution. It just requires a simple passage, like an ordinary bill in the legislature. It would have to pass our House and pass our Senate and be signed by the governor.
Right. And I don't know how to send it to the whole group, but I sent to Brianna the link to find your legislators. You go to palegis.us. Brianna, is there a way to put that out for everybody?
Yep, I sent it in the chat. I could
Great. Okay.
go ahead and
I can only see certain, sorry. Yes, so Diana had on one slide, contact your legislators, try to get them to vote for this, to co-sponsor. So we're not the electors, the voters, we, the people, we are not voting on this, but our representatives are. And if you look up your legislators, and this is a direct action, this is a great thing to, if you're in favor of open primaries and these bills, contact your legislator, look them up on that site, and you can see how they voted in the past.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can, if you want to, there's a way of searching what happened in the past. So you can go to the Pennsylvania Legislature's website, and you can go to search and advanced search. In there, you put in the legislative session, because it will automatically search this session. So you put in the legislative session. So you put in the former previous session. And then you can put in, you can also search by topic, and you can put in open primaries, and it'll bring up the bills. And so so you can go to House Bill 979 and House Bill 976, and you can then see who the supporters were last time. And thank legislators for supporting that change. If so, encourage them to reach out to their colleagues.
Thank you for the helpful information. And if anyone has any more questions, please type them in. There's a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. I have a question in the meantime. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the compelling case studies for states where close primaries were reformed. I know you talked a little bit about New Mexico, and I was just wondering if you have any ones that you think are shining examples that we could look into.
Well, the one that's been so openprimaries.org is following this, and they have a monthly Zoom, by the way, or a monthly conversation with somebody. And I think that the state that was most closely followed, and we looked back at their success, was Maine, and that's why I it showed the key ingredients of success in Maine. And having the League of Women Voters on board, of course, was also key to their success. But they got good press coverage, and they made it about fairness, and it's about time and getting on with the way the world is now, which is where there are just large amounts of independent voters. I wish I could remember the number, but the percentage of independent voters in Maine is higher than ours. But we still have a sizable amount. They had, like we do here, they had some legislator champions who, worked on their colleagues to get it done.
That's great. Thanks so much. I'll make sure to check out more info on legislation. So it looks like Jane has a question. She asked, did voter turnout increase after the reforms in Maine?
I don't have any data on Maine. I don't know the answer to that.
Understandable. Thank you. And what would you say to someone who argues that close primaries are necessary for ensuring party integrity and preventing crossovers for voting?
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question? I didn't get the whole
I
thing.
was just wondering, what would you say to someone who argued that close primaries are necessary for maintaining party integrity.
They are, I would say that why are we asking all taxpayers to pay for them? If you the party want to keep them closed, I would say that. And I would say that there are some voters who are not going to affiliate with your party or even the other party. And why wouldn't you want to engage with them?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane. And then Amy, would you like to ask me a question?
Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that data shows us that unaffiliated voters tend to lean pretty consistently in one direction or another. So while they like to be unaffiliated on principle, they do tend to actually sort of, in the aggregate, affiliate. And so the idea is also that parties are not capturing their full supporters who actually show up for them in the general elections by keeping them out of their primaries.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for lifting that up, Amy. Wonderful.
Yeah, those voters could be lending a voice to help the party choose a better candidate, more viable candidate. Mhm.
Great. Thank you so much. It doesn't look like there's any more questions. I'll give it a couple seconds. If anyone wants to type in a last minute question, feel free to use the Q&A option.
I do have a couple of quick stats for folks. This is from the Bipartisan Policy Center. States see a voter turnout rise of an average of 5 percentage points when they open their primaries to unaffiliated voters. So it does lead to an increase in turnout. They found that opening primaries to unaffiliated voters increases Asian and Latino participation as a share of the overall electorate. And opening primaries to unaffiliated voters increases the unaffiliated share of the electorate by 12 percentage points. So it allows people to unaffiliate and still feel like they participate. So they might feel more represented in general as an engaged citizen.
Well, thank you for looking that up quickly. Great.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. That's super helpful, those stats. All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So I just want to thank you so much, Diana, for giving such a wonderful presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. To watch previous recordings of Ballot Box Basics webinars or to sign up for future events, please visit the link in the chat. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Good evening. Thank you.
Okay.